As I was reading your book, you have so many, so many lessons that readers can take away on basically stepping out of their comfort zone and stop limiting themselves and really just shooting for the stars, going after
Yeah.
what is truly meant for them. So that's what I took from reading this book.
Yay.
But apart from just that overarching message, is there any other messages that you would want readers to take from your book?
Yeah, just the overall idea that you are enough as you are. I think for Black women, women of color, anyone who comes from an underrepresented background, there is this drive or motivating force that we've kind of been conditioned to do since we've been born, honestly, since we were young about, you have to be twice as good to get half as much. And I certainly think, I understand where that saying comes from, and I've certainly lived it myself. And what I've realized, honestly, within the last few years is that that's not true because you can work twice as hard, three times as hard, four times as hard. And it's not a recipe for success. Honestly, what it is a recipe for burnout. And that's what has
Mm.
happened to me several times throughout my career. And so, what I'm doing now in my role as a full time freelance writer, author, speaker, etc., is really sitting with the fact that no, I am enough. I'm talented. I don't have to overwork. I don't have to prove myself. That we just, especially for Black women, want us to be okay with being soft. Like we don't have to
Mm.
be the strong Black woman that we've been told that we have to, and that's actually doing us a disservice because it doesn't allow for that full scope of humanity. It doesn't allow for that vulnerability. Yeah, and just like those sort of things that make us who we are.
Yeah, that's so good. What advice so I read an part where you were talking about your Peloton streak
Mhm.
and
And it's right behind me.
and how you basically were on a streak for it was over a year, right?
Yeah, it was like 650 something days. It was, yeah,
Wow.
like
Wow. And then
a lot.
life happens, of course, as you
Mhm.
were a new mother, and all the other logistics behind, the things that came with your life.
Yeah.
And then just that one day, all of your hard work went to kaput.
Yeah.
And so that was a moment where you had your own self-realization of like, okay, what was I really striving for here? So I want
Right.
you to speak to the fellow perfectionists. What
Yeah.
advice do you have for those who, are striving for that perfection and, when, we're human, we're bound to fail
Mhm.
at some point.
Yeah, and as I write in the book too, I mean these streaks because I have my Apple Watch as well. Even recently, it was like we've noticed a new trend in your workouts or something, and it was like a week where it's ironic actually because today my daughter is also home from daycare, but not because she's sick, because they couldn't find a sub, and childcare crisis is a whole nother issue. But yeah, I hadn't worked out because I was taking care of her, and that was the
Mhm.
priority. And what these streaks don't allow for is, again, going back to that full scope of humanity and the fact that life happens, sick day happens, sick children happen, or just any other thing that kind of like life throws at you that you can't account for. And so it's just this first acknowledgement that perfect doesn't exist, and it's not something that I need to strive for. I mean, I was really upset in that moment where I realized that I lost the streak. Like tears were shed. And I had a whole therapy session about it afterward. And it took a while, but it was like a wake up call for me. And I talk very candidly about how this whole book and writing it at the same time as becoming a mom was really a masterclass for me in unlearning perfection. Like perfection and parenting don't go together. They have no place, they don't go together. Perfection and writing don't go together either, right? I was so hell bent on writing this perfect first draft, and it's like, no, the goal of the first draft is to get it on the page,
Yeah.
and then you can make it better. Like the tweet that I mentioned in the book as well. You can edit bad,
Mm.
but you can't edit nothing. And so many times we allow this, well, it has to be perfect before I get started. And so we wait and we wait and we wait. And before you know it, days, months, years have gone by before we've taken action toward our goals and our hopes and our dreams because we have this idea that we have to be
Mm.
perfect in order to get started. But that's not true. And after I lost the streak, what I realized was I'm still a good person, right? I think in my head, I had this as a marker of like, okay, I'm a good person because I work out every day and I have the streak going and look at me and how great I am.
Right.
And so it was a very humbling moment as well. And what I realized, like, I'm still me. I'm still the same person. I'm still worthy of love and happiness and every good thing, despite now not having this 600 plus day streak. Like, none
Mm.
of that actually matters. But I mean, I look back at when I was growing up and I was the straight A kid. I was valedictorian of my eighth grade class, honor rolls, dean lists, and we've been conditioned our perfect attendance awards, even, right? Like, it's a reward for showing up even when you don't want to,
Mhm.
even when you're sick, even if you need a mental health day. And that is just not healthy. That is not what I want to pass on to my daughter. I mean, and granted, like, yeah, I got the perfect attendance awards, right? Me and my sister, my mom was like, hey, you got it from school. You're going to take it back to school whenever we were sick and everything. And I understand, especially on these kind of days
Right.
where I have my daughter home with me and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't get anything done. And yeah,
Mm.
like going back to, the whole US childcare crisis
Mm.
being a whole nother
Mhm.
layer to it and everything. And so it's just, and I mean, I'll put up the out of office message now where it's like, hey, it's going to take me a while to get back to you. My kid is homesick. And just like the people who get it, get it. And those that don't aren't my people. And I think parenting, what it did as well was just like, no room for perfection and also no time or energy to put up that facade, right? I think for a while, especially like pre-parenting days, I could, pretend, right? On social media, you can present a
Yeah.
very carefully crafted, curated version of yourself. And when these tiny humans come along, it's just like, I don't have the time, the energy, or the
Mhm.
capacity to
Mhm.
pretend everything is perfect because it's not. And so this is it. This is what you see. This is what you get. And giving myself permission to be imperfect, I think was the biggest thing. And in doing that, in writing the book, hopefully giving other Black women, other moms, other people permission to do the same.
Ugh, and that's a wrap.
You're right.
You
Mike
just you right. I love you said two very specific things that kind of leads into two questions that I had,
Mhm.
but I want to jump to this first one about
Yeah.
knowing who your people are and who your people aren't.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, as I was reading your book, know you have a section in your book where you talk about the community, right?
Mhm.
But what would you say were some of the biggest factors that helped you to be where you are today? Would you say it was like L'Oreal's just innate intuitive and,
Oh
in
gosh,
like
no.
becoming and learning yourself? Or
Yeah.
do you think that a big part of that was the community that you had around you?
A huge part, 97%, I would say, is the community. It dates back to, and I write in the book as well, like the first book that I wrote about dinosaurs in outer space when I was 6, and how my dad really encouraged and fostered my dreams of writing. Because I mean, as a kid, granted, whenever anyone asked me what I wanted to be, I was like Janet Jackson's backup dancer, an astronaut, and a doctor. But when
Yeah.
I realized that, maybe didn't have the talent to be her backup dancer, math and science, not my best subjects, what I've always loved was writing. I mean, there's a picture in there of me at 3 years old with a notebook in my lap. And so that has always been part of me. I think there was, as you get older and you're taught to choose more realistic dreams, more profitable ones for sure. And my dad always nurtured that writer part of me, that creative side of me. And so without him, when I was 6, seeing something in me that I didn't necessarily see in myself, because he was like, yeah, you wrote this book, you should put it on your summer reading challenge. And I was like, I'm a kid. This is a
Mm.
real book. And he was like, you wrote it, so you read it. And like that really gave me the encouragement that I didn't know that I needed. My parents sacrificed, throughout my life and putting me in good schools. And, the reason I could pay off student loans faster, they took out loans as well. And I had scholarship. There's certainly the sacrifice. And support in that way. I mean, I think of my sister who, even though she's younger, is way wise beyond her years and mature, and has always shown me, and she went natural first. So I kind of like copy her in that regard. Like she's the
We're here.
adventurous.
Yep. That's me.
As the firstborns, you're very careful, you're very cautious. And
Yes.
so you see, you know, the little siblings do something, you're like, okay, well, maybe and so like she's my best friend. I love her
Mhm.
so much. And she's my person. She supported me. Every ugly cry I've had throughout my life, she has been there. My husband, I know Sharia Jackson, who was a former editor for Essence, in her book, she talked about, you know, the most important business decision that you can make is who your romantic partner is. And I have found that to be very true. He is so supportive of my dreams and goals. I mean, like as of right now, he has, you know, our daughter. So I can do this call and is my number one fan and biggest cheerleader. And having that support in someone who isn't threatened by your success and ambition, especially as a Black woman, is rare. And so appreciative. And then my girlfriends, I mean, I think especially if my friend Pam, who I mentioned in the book, who's a fellow writer and she's a poet, and the first, like, she's such a soft place for me to land. Like one of the first friendships where I felt like I could be my full, authentic, messy, vulnerable, imperfect, jealous self, right? I could bring my whole self and not be afraid that it was too much or that it was, you know, going to be shunned. And so just having those people where you can drop the guard, drop the wall, and just show up as your full, authentic self is such a treasure. Like when you find those people in this, like, your soul knows, right? The first time I met Pam, it's like, I feel like I've known you from another lifetime. And just having those people, holding them close. And by doing that, showing up as your full authentic self, you give them permission to do the same. And then it's a real honest friendship. Because, right, we all have those friendships where it's kind of like, oh, I'm just pretending. Or it's like, you know,
Mhm.
we've been friends for so long, we just like kind of go with the flow. But like those ones where you can really let your guard down, and the people who show up for you, especially like once you move into different life transitions and becoming a mom and having a kid and then asking, what can I do for you? Right. Because there's so much focus and emphasis on the baby. And so having people who are still going to show up for you and recognize and appreciate who you are outside of the different titles that you wear, is
Yeah.
just really, I wouldn't be here without them.
Right.
Like the group chats, all of that. They're
Yeah.
just so instrumental.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay, I want to go back to the perfectionism thing.
Mhm.
You said, just working towards being, reaching your goals, never failing in our mind, like we're never
Mhm.
failing, right? But of course, as we talk about 2024, the new year, and really stepping forward in everything that this year has for us,
Yeah.
um, we will encounter those failures, right? It's
Yes.
so funny. I just learned that there's a national like quitters day, January 12th.
Yeah.
I
I'm
didn't even know that was I
sorry.
didn't even know that was a thing.
Mhm.
And so basically it's like by January 12th, they're expecting everyone to be like January 1st, everyone's hitting the gym. By January
Right.
12th, like, you're faded out.
Over
So
it.
so what are some tips that you have, L'Oreal, kind of, jumping off of your book as well, but some
Mhm.
of your own personal tips apart from what you've already mentioned in this gem of a book
Yeah.
that you would offer to our Her Agenda community, on how they can conquer their
Mhm.
2024.
Yeah, that's such a great question. And it's interesting. I feel like all these tips are they seem obvious and kind of like, okay, but like to actually do them is another thing. So
Mhm.
the first I say is giving yourself permission to pause, to pivot, and experiment. So we live in a society that is just like go, 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 go all the time, like just constantly on, constantly checking email, Slack, notifications, and everything. Giving yourself a day out of the week or even an hour or two to just unplug, to rest, to truly rest, I think is something that we don't do a lot of. And especially in our industry, like media, especially is 24/7. So there's just a lot of emphasis on going and doing. And there's just, you have to allow that time to rest. I think of Trisha Hersey and the Nap Ministry and how that is a part of the revolution, right? We have to take care of ourselves and nurture ourselves, and you have to pour into your cup before anyone else's. And that goes for everybody, but especially the working moms out there, especially the Black moms out there, because we carry, or Black women rather, so much on our shoulders and give so much to our community and our loved ones and our colleagues even. And so it's just recognizing that you are also worthy of that same love that you pour out to everyone else. And you have to do that for yourself first. Like, you have to be at the top of your to-do list. And I really want to emphasize this. I think of Dr. Uche Blackstock in her book Legacy, and she talks about one of the last conversations she had, with her mom, as her mother was on her deathbed essentially, and she had the foresight to ask her, what do I need to know? Like, tell me, you're not going to be around forever, and so what do I need to know as a Black woman in this world? And her mother told her essentially that, like, put yourself first before the career, before your family, before your kids. You have to pour into yourself, because as Black women, we aren't taught to do that, and it shows up in, right, the stress, and it manifests itself in these other things that happen, to our physical health and our mental health and well-being. And that's not selfish, right? Like, and it's beyond self-care and the spa days. Those are great. And it's deeper than that, right? And it takes a village. Going back to the last question, you have to have your people who can watch your kid, who are able to, step in when you need help, but also being courageous enough to ask for help. And I think that's something that we don't do enough of as well. So yeah, the permission to pause, to pivot when something isn't working. It's okay to let it go.
Yeah.
And I say that as someone who has, constantly striving, right, for the promotion, for the raise, for the next title, for the next this, that, and the other. And it takes a toll on you, on your mental health and well-being. I mean, this was last summer, even when I was facing burnout in my full-time role, and also writing, revising, and promoting the book, and also raising this tiny human. And my therapist is like, I'm starting to notice some depressive symptoms. It's like fatigue and irritability, not having the energy to play with my daughter after she got home from daycare, right? And it's like, we spent all this time and money on IVF to have her. And so I want to be able to appreciate those moments as she's yelling in the background. So it's just giving yourself permission to pivot. If something is no longer serving you, it's okay to try something new. It's okay to start over. There's no time limit or expiration date on success, on when you have to have it all figured out, right? Like, I'm 36 and I'm still figuring it out. And I feel like once upon a time that would scare me, but now it's kind of like, no, that's okay, because, God willing, I have a long, healthy life ahead of me, and a lot of time to pivot and try something. And if that's not working, try it again. But you have to give yourself permission to do that. And that kind of leads into the next point about, stop waiting for perfect, right? I know it's the title, but it's also a call to action and a permission slip, because so often we are waiting for the perfect moment to switch careers, to leave the relationship, to move to a new city, to start the podcast, write the book, launch the blog, all these different ideas and dreams and goals and hopes that we have. But the perfect moment doesn't exist. And if you're waiting for that moment, you're going to be waiting for the rest of your life. And so something that I'm even working on. So it's like, yeah, I wrote the book, but I'm also, I'm not perfect by any means. And I still have those same kind of hangups. Like I was telling a friend the other day, I feel like if 2021 to 2023 was about writing and revising and promoting the book, like 2024 is really the year that I start living the book and taking my own advice and practicing what I preach. And a lot of, like right now I'm wearing a shirt, like I launched merchandise to complement the book. I had that idea for years, but this year finally took action. And I was like, done is better than perfect. Making progress toward a goal is better than waiting for the perfect moment to get started. You have to start, where you are with what you have, and give yourself, like, I'm kind of framing it because I still have a lot of perfectionist tendencies, just permission to experiment with different, that's what I call these different things. Like, I'm experimenting. I'm going to launch the merch and see what happens. And I started with the tote bag and the mug, and immediately in my Facebook community was like, we want shirts. And I was like, I didn't think anybody would wear it besides me. So that's good to know. But I wouldn't have known that if I didn't start small, like just putting something out and allowing, my people, my readers, subscribers, and followers to give me feedback. And so it is scary to do something and not have all of the answers and everything lined up. to do it imperfectly, but that's the magic of it, right? Is getting started, getting that feedback, reiterating, because you can always make something better, but
Yeah.
first you have to get started. And then the other thing that I'm really celebrating or living into this year is celebrating your rejections. And I
Mm,
know that sounds counterintuitive because it's like,
yeah.
but I got rejected, I failed. Like,
Mm,
why should I celebrate this?
mhm.
Not everything is going to go according to plan and result in a win. But instead of looking at it as a failure, I've been working on congratulating myself for taking that step in the first place, because so many people don't even get started. So many people don't even apply for the fellowship, submit their poem to the literary journal, right? These are real life examples that happened to me so far this year, where it's like, and even, 16 years into this, a published book under my belt, rejection still happens. And the other part of it is, allowing yourself to feel the feelings, because I'm not about glossing over it and pushing through to, like, okay, well, I've got to, keep going. No, like, give yourself the space and time to sit in your feelings, as uncomfortable as they may be. I mean, recently I came in second runner up for Best of Chicago, Best Nonfiction Writer, and I was so disappointed. Happy for my friend who
Mm,
got first,
mhm.
and also disappointed that I didn't win. And both of those things can be true. I think we've been conditioned, you have to be 100% positive all the time and like silver lining and yada yada. But that's not, going back to what we mentioned earlier about recognizing your full humanity, giving yourself space to feel the feelings. And it can be uncomfortable, especially for people like me who are Enneagram threes. We're achievers, we're workaholics, we push through and we kind of stuff the feelings down, but they're going to come up at
Yeah.
some point in time. They're going to surface, and they just, feelings need to be felt. And I rely heavily on the feelings wheel and my therapy sessions to really get to the root of what I'm feeling and just kind of allow for that space. So, a couple of days after the results came out, I was like, I'm really bummed about this, and
Mm,
I'm sad, and I'm disappointed. And just like feeling that, processing that, journaling about it, having a therapy session on it, and just kind of like feeling my way through those feelings, and to get to a
yeah.
point where I'm kind of like, okay, like, I'm upset that didn't happen, and I'm proud of myself for getting that far. Um,
Yeah.
so
I'm
yeah.
gonna interject before you move to your next point because you're dropping so much gems. But I remember in the book you do note that a friend told you that rejection is just, God's redirection,
Yeah.
like it's just a way of like life saying like you're on the path,
Hmm.
you're making the steps, but there's something even better than what, like
Yeah.
you even were trying to strive for. Or maybe there's something with your name on it. This wasn't it specifically, but
Yep.
there is
Yeah.
something else out there. And like rejection sucks. We always hate it when there's an
Oh yeah.
expectation or a hope there. But I think that life really works itself out for the best of our good. And so I just love hearing
Absolutely.
that kind of rawness from you there too. And it just reminded me about that statement that you put in your book, which I think is so
Yeah.
important for others to know.
And it's important. I have to call on that a lot. And I think about what my mom always tells me, like, what's meant for you is for you, and nobody can
Mhm.
take that away, which in the moment, I'm just like, that's not what I want to hear. But there is, wisdom behind it, and just trusting the process, trusting the journey, trusting that there's room for all of us, right? Because I think the other side of rejection sometimes is that comparison and the jealousy.
Mm,
And we look at, especially with social media, what other people are doing. For me, other writers and authors. I mean, I remember Brooklyn got the Beyonce cover, and I saw when Essence released it, and I was just like, oh, it's just probably another, like whatever, because Beyonce doesn't do interviews. No,
yeah,
Beyonce did an interview for that. And when I tell you that I was so jealous, I'm like,
right.
and Brooklyn deserves, I mean, a fellow Southern woman,
Mm,
phenomenal writer. And so just trusting that, okay, that was, meant for her, and that was her
mm,
thing. And I'm really proud of her. And then there's just recognize, I think Tracy Ellis Ross said, like, there's enough sunshine for all of us. And so trusting that I don't know that I'll ever interview Beyonce, right? But like something else, because I think it was right after my Questlove cover came out, and I was just like, oh, um, but that comparison, and comparison is the thief of joy. So like keeping your eyes on your own paper, and just really trusting the process that everything is going to work out. And it's so easier said than done. So that's why sometimes I got to limit myself on, the social media intake, because that
mhm.
will drive you insane, because nothing will be good enough. You could have a really great win of your own, and inevitably someone else is going to come back with a bigger book deal, a bigger cover story, or something else. And so the gratitude piece of it is what kind of gives me perspective and keeps me grounded, because it's like I have to remind myself constantly, like, there was a time where I prayed for everything that I have now. I think of the CBS Mornings interview for the book, and it's
Yes.
like, here I am in New York, daytime television, Gail King sitting across from me, and my husband and my daughter to my right, and like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
This is life. So just remembering that and having gratitude, which leads me to the final point about, being kind to yourself, giving yourself grace, right? Your inner critic can be so loud and so negative, and just really kind of a Debbie Downer. And so, recognizing that voice, hearing it, be like, okay, I hear you, but I'm not going to trust you or believe you, because I know what I'm capable of. I know that I'm talented and I'm smart and I'm worthy. And so, your inner critic wants to keep you safe, wants to keep you protected, wants to keep you in the comfort zone. And we know that that's not where the magic happens. And so that's why even recently I've been looking at, and I know imposter syndrome is kind of controversial now. People are like, does it exist? Stop telling people stop telling women, in particular, they
Right.
have imposter syndrome. I think both things can be true. Like, I know that that is something that I have felt throughout my life and my career. And I also know that it's compounded by racism and sexism, being the only Black woman in the room. But what I've come to do lately is just kind of like acknowledging imposter syndrome when it comes up, and recognizing it as a sign that I'm leveling up in some way. I'm pushing past the discomfort. I'm stepping into my power. And so when that inner critic starts to get loud, when the imposter syndrome bubbles up, being able to be like, okay, I know what's happening here, right? We're doing something new. We're growing. We're, challenging ourselves, and we're expanding. And that is a good thing. But it's, I'm human. It's inevitable. The self-doubt is going to come up. The comparison is going to come up. But having, the original title of the book was Trust Your Dopeness. And that's what I often rely on and come back to, of just like, yes, I'm talented, I'm enough, I'm worthy, doing these affirmations. I have my vision board right in front of me on my desk, so I can see that every day. And just, yeah, believing in yourself, I feel like, is half the battle.
It really is. It really is. Oh my goodness. I'm so full right now, honestly.
Mm.
Like, I read your book, but like hearing you really speak to some of the things that you wrote, um, it's just a reminder that we are all in it,
Yes.
and why we need people like you who are open, transparent, and willing to just share their story. It just helps the next generation to be able to kind of pave their own way by knowing that, we see the limelight, we see the great things that someone like yourself is doing, but they always say you see the glory, but you don't know the story. And so,
Ooh, I love
yes.
I'm borrowing that. Thank you.
And so there is a story to all of our lives, and I'm just so
Mhm.
appreciative of you sharing yours and giving us some awesome tips to conquer our new
Yeah.
year.